The flash of cameras blinded Zane Forrester as he emerged from the exclusive Manhattan restaurant, their rapid-fire clicks sounding like hungry insects devouring his privacy one snapshot at a time. He'd grown accustomed to this invasion over the years, the price of success in the tech world, they said, but tonight it was different. Tonight he wasn't alone in facing their predatory lenses. Miss, are you Zane's new girlfriend?" One paparazzo shouted, pushing forward toward a woman who had simply been exiting the restaurant at the wrong time. She froze like a startled deer, clutching her purse to her chest, clearly unprepared for the assault of flashing lights and invasive questions. Zane saw the panic in her eyes, the way she instinctively shrank back from the crowd closing in. Without thinking, he moved, placing himself between her and the photographers. "Back off," he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. When they continued advancing, Zane's security team stepped in, creating a protective barrier. But it was Zane himself who gently placed his hand on the small of the woman's back, guiding her toward his waiting car. "I'm so sorry about this," he said. "If you'll allow me, my driver can take you wherever you need to go." The woman, auburn-haired, wearing a simple navy dress that somehow outshone every designer outfit he'd seen that evening, looked up at him with wide, intelligent eyes. "I'm Violet," she said, her voice steadier than he expected. "Violet Grayson, and I think I'd like to take you up on that offer." Neither of them realized in that moment that their lives had just irreversibly changed. Inside the sleek black Bentley, Violet released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down her dress, the one nice outfit she owned, worn tonight to celebrate her gallery's first successful showing. "Are they always that aggressive?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Zane loosened his tie and leaned back against the leather seat. "Unfortunately, yes, though tonight they seemed particularly motivated." He studied her with curious blue eyes. "I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire. I should be thanking you," Violet said. "I've never experienced anything like that." "Few have," Zane replied with a wry smile. "It's not exactly something I'd recommend." As the car glided through the Manhattan streets, Zane found himself intrigued by this woman who hadn't immediately asked about his net worth or pulled out her phone to document her proximity to one of America's youngest billionaires. Instead, she gazed out the window, her profile illuminated by the passing city lights. "Where can my driver take you?" he asked. Violet hesitated, then said, "I live in Brooklyn, Williamsburg." "Brooklyn it is," Zane instructed his driver through the intercom. Then turning back to Violet, he asked, "Were you at Osteria for a special occasion?" A small smile played at her lips. "Actually, yes. I'm an artist, a photographer mainly, and my first gallery showing was tonight, a few blocks away. I was just treating myself to dinner after." "Congratulations," Zane said, genuinely impressed. "What kind of photography?" "Urban landscapes, mostly, finding beauty in forgotten spaces." She paused. "What about you? I assume from the paparazzi that you're someone I should recognize." Zane laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced one he used at corporate events. "I'm Zane Forrester. I founded Forrest Tech." Recognition flickered in her eyes, but not the usual $sign calculation he was accustomed to seeing. "The eco-friendly tech company. The one developing sustainable energy solutions." "That's the one. I read about your solar initiative in developing countries," Violet said. "That's actually impressive work." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Zane felt seen for something beyond his fortune. The conversation flowed easily as they crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, touching on everything from renewable energy to the changing landscape of New York's art scene. By the time they reached her modest apartment building, Zane was reluctant to see the evening end. "Thank you for the rescue and the ride," Violet said as the car stopped. Zane impulsively reached for his business card. "If you ever need rescuing from paparazzi again," he said with a smile, handing it to her. Violet took the card, her fingers brushing his. "Let's hope not, but thank you." She stepped out of the car, then turned back. "It was nice meeting you, Zane Forrester." As the car pulled away, Zane found himself watching her until she disappeared into her building. His phone chimed with dozens of notifications, emails, meeting reminders, text messages from people who wanted something from him. But for once, he ignored them all, his mind still on the photographer with the intelligent eyes who hadn't seemed impressed by his billions. The next morning, Zane sat in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, unable to focus on the quarterly reports his assistant had prepared. Instead, he found himself typing Violet Grayson's name into a search engine. Several galleries came up featuring her work, and Zane was genuinely impressed by what he saw: stark urban landscapes that somehow captured both desolation and hope. On impulse, he picked up his phone and called the gallery that had hosted her showing. 2 hours later, Zane stood before a large black and white photograph of an abandoned factory with sunlight streaming through broken windows. The price tag was modest by his standards, but represented what was likely a significant sum for an emerging artist. Mr. Forrester. The gallery owner approached, clearly recognizing him. "Can I help you with anything? I'd like to purchase this piece," Zane said, gesturing to Violet's photograph. "Excellent choice," the owner beamed. "Miss Grayson's work has been receiving wonderful attention." "This particular piece, I'll take all of them," Zane interrupted. "Her entire collection," the gallery owner's eyes widened. "The entire collection, that would be wonderful, sir. Shall I have them delivered, please?" Zane said, handing over his credit card. "And I'd appreciate if you'd let Miss Grayson know her work is going to a good home." As he left the gallery, Zane wondered what had prompted such an impulsive purchase. He collected art, certainly, but never an entire collection from an unknown artist. There was something about Violet's perspective that resonated with him, the way she found beauty in forgotten places, the very thing his company strived to do with sustainable technology. Violet was in her tiny apartment/studio, reviewing photos from a morning shoot, when her phone rang. "Miss Grayson, this is Martin from the gallery. I have the most extraordinary news. Your entire collection has been purchased." Violet nearly dropped her phone. "What, the entire collection? Who would?" "Mr. Zane Forrester. He came in personally and bought everything. He seemed quite taken with your work." After hanging up, Violet sat in stunned silence. Her first thought was suspicion. Was this some kind of charity, a billionaire's way of playing benefactor? She had spent years working to make it on her own merits, refusing family money that would have made her path easier. Her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you don't mind that I asked the gallery for your number. I wanted to say that your work is extraordinary. Would you consider showing me some of your other photographs?" Zane, Violet stared at her phone, conflicted. Part of her wanted to politely decline to prove she didn't need a wealthy patron. But another part, the artist in her, was genuinely flattered that someone had connected so deeply with her vision. After deliberating, she responded, "Thank you for supporting my work. I'm curious, though, why buy everything?" His response came quickly, "Because they tell a story I want to hear more of. Have dinner with me tomorrow." Violet found herself smiling despite her reservations. "You do realize this looks like you're trying to buy my attention, Zane. Fair point. How about this? You pick the place, you pay for your meal, and I promise not to buy anything else of yours without proper artistic consideration." Violet laughed out loud. "Deal, but I pick the place and it won't be Osteria." The next evening, Zane's driver pulled up to a small Ukrainian diner in the East Village. Zane, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down rather than his usual tailored suit, stepped out and glanced at the modest establishment with genuine curiosity. Inside, Violet was already seated in a booth, wearing a vintage t-shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked up as he entered, and her smile, unguarded and genuine, made something shift in Zane's chest. "No paparazzi?" she asked as he slid into the booth. "I took precautions," Zane said, gesturing vaguely toward a nondescript man sitting at the counter, his security detail. "This is definitely not where they'd expect to find me." "That was the idea," Violet said with a mischievous glint in her eye. "The pierogies here are worth any amount of subterfuge," they ordered, and Zane found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did in public. Violet asked intelligent questions about his work, not about his wealth or fame, but about the actual innovations his company was developing. "So why sustainable technology?" she asked, dipping a pierogi into sour cream. "You could have developed the next addictive social media platform or another way to sell people things they don't need." Zane considered the question seriously. "I grew up in Northern California, near the redwoods. My father was an environmental scientist before he died. He used to say that true wealth was measured in clean air and drinkable water." He shrugged, slightly embarrassed by his earnestness. "When I sold my first software company at 23, I decided to put that money towards something he would have been proud of." Violet's expression softened. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. The usual making the world a better place corporate line, maybe." "I mean, I do want to make the world better," Zane said with a half smile, "but it's more personal than that." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? Why photography?" Violet took a sip of her beer before answering. "I was supposed to go into finance, family tradition. But I've always seen the world differently, finding patterns and beauty where others see decay or ugliness." She shrugged. "I had to capture that, show others what I was seeing. Even if it meant disappointing your family, especially then," Violet said with a determined lift of her chin. "What's the point of having vision if you don't use it?" By the time they'd finished their meal, with Violet insisting on paying for her portion, Zane felt as though he'd known her for years rather than days. When they stepped outside, the night air was cool and the street was quieter than usual for New York. "Would you show me?" Zane asked suddenly. "Show you what? How you see the world. Take me somewhere you'd photograph." Violet studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Can you walk in those shoes?" Zane glanced down at his expensive but comfortable loafers. "I think I'll manage." They dismissed his driver and security against the security team's strong objections and set off on foot through the East Village. Violet led him down side streets and through small parks, pointing out details he would have never noticed. The way sunset light reflected off a particular building's windows, creating a cascade of golden squares. How an ancient fire escape created geometric shadows on brick walls, the unexpected beauty of wildflowers growing through cracks in the concrete. "See that?" she said, pointing to where the setting sun illuminated an old water tower. "That's only visible like this for about 10 minutes each day, and only from this exact spot." Zane looked at the water tower, glowing like a copper beacon against the darkening sky, then at Violet's face, alive with excitement and passion. In that moment, he understood that she possessed something his billions could never buy, a way of seeing beauty in the ordinary that transformed everything around her. They ended up on the Brooklyn Bridge as darkness fell completely, the city lights creating a glittering panorama around them. Leaning against the railing, Violet turned to find Zane watching her instead of the view. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You've completely changed how I see this city," he said quietly, "and I've lived here for 15 years. Before she could respond, a flash went off nearby, followed by another. A photographer had recognized Zane despite his casual clothes and was rapidly taking pictures. "Mr. Forrester, who's your friend? Is she the same woman from the other night?" the man called out, advancing toward them. Zane instinctively moved to shield Violet, but she surprised him by stepping forward. "Excuse me," she said firmly to the paparazzo. "I'm a photographer too, and I understand you're doing your job, but we're having a private moment. Would you mind giving us some space?" The man hesitated, clearly surprised by her direct but respectful approach. "I'd be happy to give you a statement another time," Zane added, following her lead, "but not tonight." To their surprise, the photographer nodded. "Sorry to interrupt, enjoy your evening." He backed away, though not before taking one more distant shot. "That was unexpected," Zane said as they continued their walk. "Usually they're more persistent. People respond to being treated like people," Violet said simply. Then she grinned. "Also, I slipped him your business card and told him to email you for a proper interview." Zane laughed loudly, the sound echoing across the bridge. "Resourceful. Remind me to have you negotiate my next business deal." Their evening ended with a quiet goodbye outside Violet's apartment building. No kiss, no dramatic declarations, just a lingering handshake and Zane's promise to call her the next day. As he rode back to his penthouse in his car, Zane realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about work or obligations or the weight of running a multi-billion-dollar company. Instead, his mind was filled with water towers bathed in golden light and the smile of a woman who paid for her own dinner. Over the next few weeks, they fell into an unexpected pattern. Zane would find excuses to be in Brooklyn for meetings, which would mysteriously end just in time for him to drop by Violet's latest photography location. Violet would occasionally accept his invitation to Forrest Tech events, where she charmed his business associates with her straightforward manner and genuine interest in sustainable technology. They were careful to keep their growing relationship private, though the occasional photograph would appear in tabloids, speculating about the mysterious woman often seen with the reclusive billionaire. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Zane surprised Violet at her studio, arriving drenched despite his umbrella. "I had an idea," he said without preamble, water dripping from his coat onto her floor. Violet lowered her camera. "Hello to you too. What kind of idea requires getting pneumonia?" "Forrest Tech is launching a new solar initiative in rural communities. We need photographs that capture both the environmental challenges and the human impact." He hesitated. "I was hoping you might be interested in the project." Violet set her camera down carefully. "Zane, I appreciate the thought, but I don't want special treatment because we're—" She paused, unsure how to define what they were. "Friends," Zane supplied with a raised eyebrow. "Yes, friends." "This isn't special treatment," Zane insisted. "Your work speaks for itself. The way you find hope in forgotten places, that's exactly the perspective this project needs." Violet considered him skeptically. "And it has nothing to do with the fact that we've been spending time together." "It has everything to do with that," Zane admitted. "Because spending time with you has shown me how you see the world, and that vision is what our project needs." He ran a hand through his damp hair. "Look, I've prepared a proper proposal. The compensation is standard for a photographer of your caliber. You'd have complete creative control. If you're not interested, just say so, and I'll find someone else." Violet picked up the folder he'd set down, examining the project details. It was, in fact, exactly the kind of work she was passionate about, documenting the intersection of environment, technology, and human lives. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Zane nodded, accepting her caution. "That's all I'm asking." He turned to leave but stopped at the door. "By the way, there's a charity gala this Friday for environmental education. Would you consider being my +1, as friends, of course?" Violet couldn't help smiling. "As friends, I'll be there." The gala was held at the Natural History Museum, transformed for the evening with sustainable decorations and lighting powered by Forrest Tech's newest solar technology. Violet arrived in a simple but elegant emerald gown borrowed from a designer friend rather than purchased, as she'd insisted to Zane when he'd offered to help with her outfit. Heads turned as she entered on Zane's arm. He looked striking in his tuxedo, but it was the way he looked at her that caught people's attention, as though she were the only person in the room. "Everyone's staring," Violet whispered as they moved through the crowd. "Because you're beautiful," Zane replied simply. "Or because they're wondering what the billionaire is doing with the unknown photographer." Zane stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Violet, look around. This room is full of wealthy, powerful people, but you're the only one who makes me feel like I'm more than my bank account." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by a board member wanting to introduce Zane to a potential investor. The moment passed, but Violet felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first night in his car. Later, as they danced beneath the museum's famous blue whale, Violet found herself relaxing into Zane's arms, her head resting against his shoulder. They moved slowly, barely aware of the other couples around them. "I've decided to accept the project," she said quietly. Zane pulled back slightly to look at her. "Really? On one condition, Violet added, that you come with me, at least for part of it. I want you to see firsthand the impact your technology is having. Zane's expression softened. I think that could be arranged. The music changed to something faster, but they continued their slow dance, lost in their own rhythm. You know, the tabloids are going to have a field day with this, Violet murmured, nodding toward several photographers discreetly capturing the gala from the perimeter. Let them, Zane said, drawing her closer. For once, they'll actually be reporting something true. As the evening drew to a close, they escaped the formal goodbyes, slipping out a side entrance where Zane's driver waited. The car pulled away from the curb just as several paparazzi realized who was leaving and rushed toward them, cameras flashing. In the privacy of the backseat, Zane took Violet's hand. I'm sorry about them. It never seems to stop. Violet squeezed his hand. It's part of your world. I'm starting to understand that. It doesn't have to be part of yours, Zane said, his expression serious. If this is too much, Zane, Violet interrupted, if I were afraid of cameras, I chose the wrong profession. She smiled, trying to lighten the moment, but Zane remained solemn. It's more than just cameras. My life comes with scrutiny, expectations, assumptions. It's a lot to ask of anyone. Are you trying to talk me out of seeing you? Violet asked, only half joking. Zane shook his head. I'm trying to be honest about what you're getting into. The last woman I dated sold our text messages to a tabloid. Violet winced. That's awful, but you should know by now that I'm not interested in your money, Zane. I know, he said softly. That's what terrifies me, because it means I have something much more valuable to lose. The car pulled up to Violet's apartment, but neither made a move to end the evening. Would you like to come up? Violet asked. For coffee or something? Zane hesitated, then nodded to his driver before following her inside. Violet's apartment was small but filled with character photographs covering the walls, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, plants thriving on every windowsill. It was the opposite of Zane's minimalist penthouse with its designer furnishings and curated art collection. It's not much, Violet said, suddenly self-conscious as she saw her home through his eyes. It's perfect, Zane replied, and he meant it. Every corner reflected Violet's personality, creative, unpretentious, alive with possibility. She made coffee and they sat on her small balcony that overlooked a quiet Brooklyn street. The night was cool, the city sounds a distant backdrop to their conversation. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Violet said, curling her legs beneath her on the chair. Zane considered the request. I'm lonely most of the time, he admitted finally. Even in rooms full of people who claim to be my friends. Violet nodded, understanding. Money creates a barrier. It's not just the money, Zane said. It's what people think the money means. They see the success, the power, but not the responsibility, not the pressure. He looked at her directly. But you see me, not the billionaire, just me. Violet reached across the small space between them, taking his hand. That's because the billionaire is the least interesting thing about you, Zane laughed softly. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Your turn, Violet said. Ask me something, Zane thought for a moment. What are you afraid of? Losing my vision, Violet answered without hesitation. Not my eyesight, but my way of seeing the world. I'm afraid of becoming cynical or jaded, of stopping seeing beauty in broken things. Zane moved his chair closer to hers. I don't think that could ever happen. It's who you are, not just what you do. They talked until dawn began to lighten the sky, sharing fears and dreams, past failures and hopes for the future. When Zane finally left, their goodbye was a gentle kiss, a promise of something more to come. The next 6 months transformed both their lives. Violet traveled to rural communities across the country, documenting Forest Tech's solar initiative. Zane joined her when he could, seeing firsthand how his technology was changing lives. The photographs Violet captured were extraordinary children reading by solar-powered light, elderly couples sitting on porches illuminated by sustainable lamps, community centers powered by energy harvested from the sun. Each image told a story of renewal and possibility. When they weren't traveling for the project, They built a life together in New York, a blend of Zane's high-profile world and Violet's artistic community. They learned to navigate the constant attention from the press, sometimes evading the cameras, other times facing them together with quiet dignity. Violet's career flourished, her work gaining recognition beyond the Forrest Tech project. She maintained her independence, insisting on paying her own way despite Zane's occasional attempts to spoil her. In turn, she helped ground him, pulling him away from work for impromptu adventures to discover hidden corners of the city he thought he knew. It wasn't always easy. Their first real argument came when Zane, trying to be helpful, spoke to a major gallery about featuring Violet's work without consulting her first. "I don't need you to open doors for me," she'd said, hurt and angry. "I need you to respect that I want to open them myself." The lesson was valuable for both of them, establishing boundaries that honored each other's independence while building a partnership based on mutual respect. 1 year after their first meeting, Zane brought Violet back to the restaurant where they'd first encountered each other. As expected, paparazzi gathered outside, but this time they were prepared. "Ready?" Zane asked as their car approached. Violet nodded, squeezing his hand. Together, they emerged from the car, facing the flashing cameras with calm smiles. Instead of rushing past, Zane paused, Violet beside him. "Good evening," he addressed the photographers respectfully. "Miss Grayson and I are celebrating tonight, and we'd appreciate a bit of privacy. If you'd like to take a few photos now, we'll pose for you, and then we ask that you allow us our evening." Surprised by the approach, the paparazzi actually cooperated, taking their photos as Zane and Violet stood together, comfortable in each other's arms. Inside the restaurant, they were seated at a quiet corner table. Violet looked around, remembering. "Hard to believe it's been a year since I was accidentally mistaken for your date. The best mistake that ever happened to me," Zane said, reaching across the table for her hand. "Though I'm hoping tonight you'll agree to be my date for a much longer term." Violet's eyes widened as Zane produced a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring unlike any she'd expected, not a massive diamond that would announce his wealth, but a simple band inset with tiny blue stones that caught the light like stars. "The stones are from the first solar panels we installed together," Zane explained. "Repurposed like so many of the places you find beauty in." Tears filled Violet's eyes as Zane continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Violet Grayson, you've shown me how to see the world through new eyes. You've taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in moments of genuine connection. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Violet whispered, then laughed through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." As Zane slipped the ring onto her finger, applause broke out from nearby tables. They looked up to find the other diners smiling at them, strangers sharing in their joy. Outside, when they finally emerged, the paparazzi were waiting. But this time, when the cameras flashed, Violet didn't shrink away and Zane didn't need to shield her. They faced the lights together, her hand in his, the unique ring catching the camera flashes. "Mr. Forrester, Miss Grayson, is that an engagement ring?" someone called out. Zane looked at Violet, silently asking permission. When she nodded, he turned to the photographers with a genuine smile. "Yes, it is. I'm the luckiest man in the world tonight." Later that night, in the quiet of Zane's penthouse, soon to be their shared home, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city they both loved, albeit in different ways. "A year ago, I never would have imagined this," Violet said, admiring the way her ring captured the city lights. "What part?" Zane asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "Being engaged to a billionaire," Violet laughed. "Being engaged to you. The man who sees beauty in sustainable energy and carries his father's values into boardrooms. The man who respects my independence even when it would be easier to just write a check." She turned in his arms to face him. "The billionaire part is the least of it." Zane kissed her then, deeply and tenderly. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "You know, the paparazzi actually did me a favor that night." "How so?" "If they hadn't scared you, I wouldn't have had an excuse to rescue you, and you wouldn't have had the chance to rescue me right back." "Rescue you?" Violet asked, puzzled. From a life where no one saw past the money, Zane explained. You fought through all that, the cameras, the wealth, the privilege to find the real me. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. As they stood together, looking out over the city that had brought them together, Zane knew with absolute certainty that of all his business ventures and financial successes, loving Violet was by far his wisest investment. And as the night embraced them, they both silently acknowledged that some treasures couldn't be captured by cameras or measured in billions. They could only be felt by hearts brave enough to see beyond the flash.